Hi everyone, my name's Lanjul. I'm a grateful recovered addict. Ain't it a blessing to ain't it a blessing to actually be able to practice gratitude? Ain't it a blessing to be a recovered addict? Do you know what I mean? Like, ain't it a blessing to be able to sit down, wear a clean suit, wear a clean shirt, have a smile, but I mean internally, not for show, internally, and feel all right about myself. Fuck me. Wow. Like, ain't it a blessing to be able to just come on a meeting and just talk your truth and genuinely say to other human beings out there on these Zoom boxes in person that recovery is possible, permanent recovery is possible. Like, for me, that is a miraculous thing. That's a miraculous demonstration of the power of God and the power of this program. But do you know, I suffer with three components to an illness, and I didn't realize that. And the first component being I suffer with a living problem. I don't know how to live life successfully, and the book describes that as having a spiritual malady. And before picking a drink and drug up, I displayed all symptoms of that. You know, that if you've been around a little bit or hear it, being irritable, restless, discontented, and all the items on page 52, having problems with your personal relationships, so on and so forth. That was apparent. That was apparent in me before I picked a drink and drug up. I was actually born in Peterborough, and I moved to Manchester when I was probably about 5 or 6. And boy, did I find it very, very difficult to make any form of friends at that age. I found it really difficult. Even being on it, even being asked to play football on my break in primary school. And I remember stood there and I was playing in the middle of the field and I felt disconnected and isolated. And that feeling never really left me. That feeling never really left me. And then I'd want to be off the playground and in the class, but then when I'm in the class, I don't want to be in the class. But then that teacher irritates me, and the next teacher irritates me. And then I want to be at home, and my mum and dad, bless them, they irritate me. And then I collect things like Pokemon cards or heavily get invested into extracurricular activities, and that feeling wears off, and I'm always discontented as a human being, and I don't know why, and I try various means throughout my life of trying to fix myself. Like to a later degree, I got involved in bodybuilding, and I genuinely thought when I hit a certain, this is the thoughts of it. When I genuinely thought in my head, yeah, when I reach a certain level of my waist being small and my chest being these measurements and my body fat being a certain percentage, then surely I like myself and you guys will like me and everything will be okay. And that just didn't happen for me. Whatever means I tried to fix myself, I was never fixed. So it wasn't a surprise that I'm gonna at some point pick a drink and drug up. And that's exactly what I did. And I didn't realize that was gonna be at first that was a solution to my living problem. And then it just ate me from the inside out. Literally ate me from the inside out. And it just, my life became a living hell. And I mean, quite literally. And when I picked a drink and drug up for the first time, I didn't put one down for well over a decade, every day. And the liar would manifest in my head with just like this. Maybe you just like to wind down more than the average person, Langell. So that's why you're doing it. Like every day. Like, and I'd have that in my head, let's say at 7 years of continually drinking and using every day. But deep down in my soul, I knew that that was off. That statement weren't completely accurate. Like I may be insane to a certain degree, but I wasn't in complete full flight from reality, and that's a truth of mine. I wasn't in complete full flight from reality. I knew deep down that that was bullshit. but I was in no point, I was at no point in that example of wanting to admit to myself that maybe you got a problem. Because do you know what? Here's a truth of mine. Because I felt so uncomfortable in my own skin and I wanted to tear it off. And I didn't feel comfortable in the world around me. And I didn't feel comfortable with you guys or myself. I needed it. And I knew I needed it because it was too scary to try and live life. And then it had lots of problems, and I'd enter relationships with ladies, and they'd quickly find out that he's got a problem with alcohol. He's got a problem with alcohol, and I try masking it with various means of maybe wining and dining them 3 times a week, or having to stop it late at work, or various different lies to conceal a problem that I knew I had. So at that point, a little bit later, I knew I had a problem, but I weren't willing to address it to me and myself. Absolutely not, I wasn't. And I could go on and on about it. For me, for a long period of time, it was medicine. I thought it was habitual medicine, genuinely. And the real kick in the bollocks really came for me is when I kind of had a sufficient enough consequences, getting arrested, losing businesses, losing jobs, losing loved ones, having estranged kids, and I thought to myself, do you know what? That's not worth it because the pain of drinking and using every day is starting to outweigh the pain of not being able to live clean and sober. That's my truth. And then I quickly found out this that I can't. I'd make a resolution that I'm gonna have a blowout, I don't know, on a Wednesday evening. But Thursday is definitely the day that I'm never ever gonna drink and use again, only to be on the way to work and I'd buy a drink. That for me was a big kick in the bollocks. Because when they say statements like this in meetings, and I kind of preface this, I spent like 5 years of just being in and out, and not really doing much, listening to people putting action in, and listening to people with consistency in their life and in the recovery routine. And I just didn't do that. I didn't really do very much. I talked a good game, but I didn't really put much action in. So I knew this stuff worked, and I I tried that the lie would get me in various different means, like for example, maybe you've just not exerted enough willpower, Lanjul. Maybe when you said to yourself on the Wednesday evening, maybe you didn't fully believe, maybe you weren't motivated enough. And then that'd be me off then on another bender for 2 years, 2 years straight. And then I'd get like an idea of, well, you're 27 on your 28th birthday. That is going to be the commitment that you're going to stop forever. And it just wouldn't happen. And I was unwilling to admit for a long period of time that you can't fucking stop, mate. You can't stop, and there's not much you can do about this. And now you've got two problems. You can't live clean and sober. You can't live life. The suicidal ideation as a kid is a fucking major thing. And that scared me shitless. And that's the truth. And I had another problem. I can't stop taking fucking drink and drugs. And I'm not, and I'm unwilling to kind of admit that to myself. I tried stopping, but the lie would come in my head in a crafty way that maybe you're not exerting yourself well enough. And that happened lots of times. And they say that this illness is a progressive illness. And the consequences just got worse and worse. So for example, when I was 21, 21, I got married, and I had a kid, and I got married. And the consequences, of that, I didn't actually make the wedding day. I'll give you another example. Not turning up to probation, and then I'd get remanded and put in prison. I'll give you another example. Being in hospital and telling and consultants telling you that if you ever take a drink again, you're going to develop wet brain. And if you suffer, if you kindle with alcohol ever again, Langell, you're going to suffer with DTs. And if you're going to suffer with much more severe DTs, and that's going to have an effect of a seizure or a stroke or a heart attack, mate. And I thought all this appeal to me would kind of jolt me into a state of reasonableness. It would jolt me enough to say I'm not going to do that and be able to back that up with not doing that. And I was never able to do that. And they said the difference between a heavy drinker and a real alcoholic addict is, so do you have a sufficiently strong enough reason? Well, I had many. I lost businesses. I suffered from ill health. I had lots of change of environments in my life, and I was unable to stop. And then I watch a friend. This is an interesting point here, like, and I witnessed this as well. And this was another big sting for me. I watched a friend who habitually smoked weed, and this is the truth. And then one day he goes, "I've got married, I've got a kid, and I've started a business, and I've started a charity." And he watched some YouTube videos on cognitive behavioral therapy, and he stopped. And he's never smoked weed again. And he still went out on drunken use in moderation. And that shell shocked me because when I tried exerting myself at this point in my life, quite seriously, I was absolutely unable to stop. Absolutely unable. And I'd go to doctors and ask them what's wrong, and they couldn't provide me an answer. And they'd give me tablets to take, and I'd just drink through those tablets until I'm sick and then continue because I'm a psychopath like that. And then I got to the point where just thinking to myself as a human being, you're just going to probably shave off. It started with 10 years of your life, 15 years of your life, 20 years of your life. And then it got to the point where I was suffering from strokes. I was suffering from seizures. I was having major, major health consequences. And I started to resign myself to the certainty that you're just definitely going to die an alcoholic death. And there's fuck all you can do about it. Multiple detox centers, multiple rehabs. I could just continue to go on and on and on. And I tell you what, it was hell on earth. Absolutely hell on earth. I tried fixing myself externally with lots of different things, and I was misdirected in this because I'd have faith, but in the wrong things. So, for example, what I mean by that is I'd have faith that if I get back with my beloved ex, then she'll fix me, surely. Or if I just hit this threshold of income, then I'll surely be content and okay, and I won't need to drink and use. If I have my son's back in my life, it'll all be okay. Or if my driving ban comes up and I can drive again, it'll all be okay. And I was having misdirected faith all the time because I was employing faith. Because if I get from point A to B, then surely in that destination of arrival of me being hopeful or faithful of a certain process, then Lanjul would just be okay, and this will just be a distant memory. And it wasn't the case for me. And I just had one more attempt that exerted my willpower and knowledge about myself, and one more failure, and that just went round and round on a vicious merry-go-round that just happened to get deeper and faster. For just it felt like a lifetime or beyond a lifetime, beyond a lifetime. And my end point, like I literally was in the worst type of health state possible. Like, talk about not having shame when you've not washed for 6 months. You smell a piss. You smell a shit. I'm being serious. You haven't changed your boxers in days. Your socks stick to your feet. This is the truth, the point blank truth. And I'm absolutely unable to peel myself away from a bottle of vodka or a bag of cocaine. And that's the fact. That's the point blank fact. And I was that wrapped up in self and selfishness, I would say, fuck it. I don't even care about the kids anyway. I don't even care about living in a normal society. I'll just drink myself until I fucking die. And now I'm self-loathing and in self-destruct mode. And on episodes of in massive alcohol-induced episodes and drug-induced episodes, I try killing myself. And then I got forced into the rooms for Cocaine Anonymous. And I say forced, it turned out to be a blessing in disguise, a grace of God, a mustard seed that grew. Because then I listened to people, there's some people that, in the physical room on Zoom that I heard, and it kind of pricked my ears up. But at that moment in time, I wasn't ready. And the reason why I wasn't ready, because I wasn't willing to admit defeat to this. I still thought, how fucking deluded from just describing it out loud now, but I genuinely thought if I just exert myself just that bit more, then I won't need a 12-step program after listening to you guys. And it just didn't work. And then I spent 5 years coming in and out, being deceitful in a 12-step program, lying to a sponsor, being manipulative, saying I've made newcomer calls when I haven't, saying I've wrote a gratitude list when I haven't. Like to the extent copy and pasting my sponsor's gratitude list and sending it in back. Because surely that's what you get well. Surely that's how you get well in it, Lange. Do you know what I mean? Missing morning calls, bullshitting your way through step work program, through the steps and not really sponsoring people, never doing spot checks, never picking the spiritual toolkits up, bullshitting you've done a morning routine. And then it just led me to more and more, even more of a destitute life. And at this point, like health professionals are saying, you're genuinely going to die, mate. You're genuinely gonna die. And I weren't too sure if I was ever going to get a 12-step program. That's the truth. I remember being after being in and out for a bit, I developed some relationships with some people. And what one of them said, like, maybe you're just an unfortunate person who is inconstitutionally incapable of being honest. And that scared the shit out of me because I knew I had an acute illness an acute fatal. It was acute and it was fatal. I knew I was going to die and it scared me. And then I went out again, come back, and then on the last time that I went out, something changed in me, and I kind of got this clarity, and it just looked like this. It was like a sinking feeling, and it describes it in one of the stories. And that sinking feeling was the realization that your life's unmanageable internally, Langell, and it's always going to be that way with you trying to be in the steering wheel of your life. And you're always going to be powerless over drink and drugs. That's abundantly clear. You fucked. You fucked. And it was almost like God's way of saying, son, enough is enough. And I just felt this genuine break inside me. Genuine break, and they call it that internal snap. And some people say that you're beaten into a state of reasonableness, and I was sufficiently beaten into a state of reasonableness whereby then, because to cut it all down, I just wanted to live life like a normal human being. I wanted to be happy. I wanted to have fulfilled relationships. I wanted to fulfill some aspirations in my life. I'm just being real with you. And I was absolutely able to do that with having a spiritual malady and a mental obsession and a bodily allergy that was killing me. But when I realized that I can't do nothing about it, that's when I honestly sought help. And I went back to the same guy that I fucked about absolute loads. And he offered me the same suggestions because I was at a certain point in my recovery, I was kind of like one of the elders who's X amount of years clean is going to take me to the side and say, "Hey, Lange, listen, we don't normally say this to the less fucked up ones, but with you, we're going to kind of give you this secret fucking tool," and it just didn't exist. He just gave me the same tools that you all guys actually did use. I mean, actually used. And he offered me praying. He offered me meditation. He offered me cultivating gratitude and writing a gratitude. He offered me reading certain pages out of the big book. He offered me an accountability tool of calling him at a set time. He offered me a getting out of self tool because I was too used to being just a self-centered person, and that is the root of my problems of calling other people. He asked me to go on to meetings, but just shut up now, Angel. Just shut up, please, because you've tried explaining yourself on meetings so many times, and you just need to listen to a solution, mate. And I did. I just shut up and I just listened, and I listened to these stories of how people got well and following consistency in their life and following a morning routine and genuinely getting out of self. Like, hey, hi Dave, how are you on a call? Genuinely writing some stuff down, listening to a speaker tape, and I started to put effort because I suppose what I'm trying to say is when I conceded to me and myself that I'm an alcoholic, an addict, the change was that I absolutely need to put recovery first, and that needs to be the focal point of my life because otherwise you're gonna die, mate. And the reality is I didn't want to die. That's the truth. I didn't want to die. So I set about it like an absolute madman. Like I remember you need to get service on meetings, you need to give back. And then I had like seven or a fair amount of service positions because I didn't want to, I'm not putting recovery secondary no more. And I just went about it like a madman. At least they knew I was mad. I always find it funny on a listening to a speaker tape, like the sickest person in the room is the person who doesn't know he was sick. Fuck me, that was me for fucking X amount of time. At least I know now that I am a sick person. Um, and we went through a 12-step program, and I definitely identified with step one, and you know, talking about the Godwood wasn't necessarily an issue for me or a higher power. When I realized that self-reliance has failed me, living in a certain way has absolutely failed me. Yeah, you prejudice towards this power of the universe or God, is just absolutely fucking stupid at this point, Landry, because you ain't got no other option, mate. You ain't got no other option. I'm going to try and put that power first before everything else. Yeah, I am. Yeah. Do I have a willingness to grow towards that power like you other guys have? And the best thing about it as well is that there's so many testimonies throughout the Fellowship of Cocaine Anonymous that this stuff absolutely works and the power of God is real and alive. That's the truth. So then with my step three, making a decision. It wasn't too much of a hard decision to try to live in a certain honest and pure way and turn my thoughts and my life over to the care of God. Of course, that wasn't too hard because I realized that living in a self-pitying way or a self-seeking way or in a self-centered way, so on and so on, a selfish capacity. How far's that got you, mate? Well, it hasn't really got you any far. You at that point you're living in temporary accommodation, which I was practicing gratitude for because I'd have been fucked otherwise. A recovery home, a dry house, you know you were fucked. You didn't have two pence to rub together. You had a bag of clothes. You were fucking destitute, mate. So it was quite natural for me to. It was fairly easy at that point to realize I'd become convinced that any life run on self-will could hardly be a success. Trying to live in self-propulsion could hardly be a success. And if you don't know some of these words, please get a big book and sponsor. Revolutionize your life, and I mean it as well. I genuinely mean that. I wouldn't be sat on a meeting talking all this if it didn't actually work. It genuinely works, and I mean it. And I'm trying to just portray this in a real simple form that could be identified to the guy who's new around, and that's the truth. And then I got told to write some inventory, but inventory as in like a pad paper, write some stuff down. Okay, Lange, what's pissing you off? What are you genuinely resentful of? What fears genuinely do you have as a human being? What harms have you been unwilling to admit in the past, but now you're going to be willing to admit? Just be fearless and thorough in the inventory. And you know the beautiful thing about going and writing a step four and reading it out in step five is because I was deluded and can still be deluded and insane in life. And a lot of it is just fancied imaginary situations that have no, they're not reality. Not reality. I imagine certain situations and then it gets me in fear. Or I imagine situations and then it causes me to act in a certain way where I cause harm to others. Or I imagine situations that causes me to then get resentful to you. And when I wrote this stuff down and discussed it in the presence of God, I started to see the truth about things. I suppose the number one thing is your head is absolutely fucked lunch. Your head is fucked and you need a massive degree of thawing out. And the second thing is to see some defects of character and to see them really and truly, not caring about seeing your sons for such a long period of time, never paying child maintenance, committing fraud. It's not good behavior, is it? When you look at it and you broadcast it out, it's not good behavior. It's not how I envisioned conducting myself, you know, swearing and threatening hospital staff. It's not really how wanted to conduct myself. Like, and that kind of leads me on to thinking, like, at a certain point when I seen the truth that I lived in a house for over 12 months and I didn't pay no rent to this guy. And he stopped coming round knocking on the door because I threatened to kill him multiple times. And then I did a convincing thing because I'm like a chameleon. I can switch it on when I want to. When the police came round, I turned it on him. So then he was told to go through the right channels. And I just manipulated the situation. And then when I wrote that down on pen and paper, genuinely, and I seen the truth, I seen how disgusting that can be as a human being. That's probably the straightest way I can say it. It's really disgusting. And then and then in my six and seven, it's all about like, do you want that type of stuff? Do you want those characteristics as a human being, or do you want God to remove them for you? Please, God, can you remove them for me? And that is definitely an ongoing process. And I kind of run with this rent arrears situation. And when it came to making amends to this person, you know, give you a genuine example. And I called him up, said to my sponsor, how do I do it? And he said, call him. I went, what? Call him? He went, yeah, call him. So I called him up and I said, Steve, I'm really sorry for what I've done. And I just kept it straight to the point. I went, can I have your bank details? I'm going to transfer every bit of money that I owe you. And at that point, that was, I'm just going to keep it real. That was all my backdated PIP, all my backdated universal credit, and probably borrowing about 20 quid that I had in my bank account. And all the people in the dry house said to me, don't do it, you fucking stupid. And I've got all you guys on Zoom saying to me, do it's the right thing. And everyone who seems to be clean, sober, and happy backed that. And I transferred him the money. And something really changed in me. I received more comfort internally as a result of that. It was like a delayed gratification for me for a few days. Like, and then something came over me just a little bit, just even more. Because at that point, I'm not drinking and using, and I'm receiving some of the benefits of the program internally. I'm feeling better about myself. And then around the step 9 time and doing that and conducting that financial amends, it was almost like my shoulders relaxed even more. I could breathe even just I could breathe more at ease, and I felt better about myself, and I knew I did the right thing. And then I asked him to meet up with me to make to make a face-to-face amendment, and then he told me to fuck off, which is fair enough. Fair enough. I took the piss out of him for the best part of half a decade. Why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he want to tell me to fuck off? That's okay. I made the approach. Water over the dam, I think the book says. And that's okay. And then I moved on. And then I was given tools of like spot check inventory to check to check things, to check my thinking and behavior. And that's been paramount to my recovery. Massively paramount to my recovery because at a click of a finger, I can a click of a finger, I can assess a situation incorrectly and then become resentful to that. Especially when I was living in a dry house with six other men who all suffer with the same disease that I suffer with. It was a breeding ground to do inventory, and it was a tool that I picked up. And notice now I'm using all these tools in my recovery day to day, and it's really helping me with my emotional balance. And then around my step 11. I was already given prayer and meditation to start invoking a relationship with God. And at the start, I didn't know what that relationship was going to be. I didn't know what was going to be the sunlight, the water, power of the universe, and God, a religious God. I had no idea. I just knew I was fucked, and I knew it was a dilemma, and I knew I needed to continue to seek this power, and so I did, and I continue to do. And then I was given another tool to appraise my day in the evening to have an honest account of the pros and cons of, where I've done good or done bad, and just to keep it in its simplest form. And that's a tool in itself, and it's massively important because then I can take what positive action I need to take place from the previous day into my next day, and I try to do that. And then it must and around this time I haven't drank and used. I'm feeling more content, and the result of that, of these little experiences I'm having spiritually, resulted in a spiritual awakening. And then that spiritual awakening for me has got deeper and deeper the more I've got connected to this power, which now I choose to call God. And why wouldn't I want to pass this message on and sponsor a boatload of other lads constantly be in the book? Like I like a bit in the book when it says um one of the co-founders saying like, what do essentially he gets at the fact that we're doing a lot of 12-step work and sponsoring other people is like taking an insurance policy out for a future slip, a future relapse. And I just absolutely hammered it. Why wouldn't I? I suffer with an illness that's going to kill me and it's out to get me. Why wouldn't I do that? And as a result of doing this with consistency, my life has just gone from leaps and bounds. And I was speaking to someone yesterday, and they said, ain't it amazing that our conversations, because we've become a friend in recovery, real close guy. And he said, like, our conversations have completely changed since when you first came in, Lanjul. And I reflected on that, and I was like, wow, yeah, the conversations we have are completely different, completely different. Like recovery is possible and rebuilding your life is absolutely possible from absolutely hitting rock bottom. And that's the truth. That's the truth. I just need to really become accepting of the fact that I'm powerless over this stuff and then actually go at it like the clappers. And then going at it like the clappers, which is called action, I'll end up resulting in that in gaining connection to God who's going to take care of stuff that I can't do myself. For example, stop drinking and using. That's the truth. Yeah, hopefully somebody got from that something from that. Thank you.